Hi everybody, it's DM Captain Obvious, and we are about to be putting out a 20+2 seek on leadchess.org. So let's see what we can get. Hope you're doing well today. I do like this time control of 20+2. It'll give us plenty of time to discuss what's happening on the board, really go into the ideas that I have, looking at the strategy. Sometimes you have to wait a little bit for these longer time controls. Alright, KiritoRocky92, assuming that's his birth year here. So, some provisional ratings. Let's go ahead and play E4, see what Kirito has against the most common opening for white. Okay, so Knight C6, he's not going to reveal how he wants to. Okay. I've never been a tremendous fan of these sorts of setups with these Queens Indians or early B6s, things like that. They're fine, just not really my style. We're just going to follow simple developmental procedure, knights before bishops. Okay, it's a double fiend shadow. I wonder if he's going to try to set up some kind of hippo. Something with H6, A6, a small pawn center, fiend shadowed bishops. Normally you see the knights end up on D7 and E7 in those hippos, but this is fine too. Okay, so I get to kind of decide how I want to proceed here. These sort of modern defenses where you try to exert control on the center based on piece play from the diagonals or the flanks of the board specifically. Do I want to try to castle long and play for something like F2, F4, and then F4, F5, and attack? If that's the case, I can develop my dark square bishop and then play Queen D2, something like that. What to do, what to do. He hasn't really wrested white's opening advantage from me, I feel. So I'm going to go ahead and actually infringe, do none of the things I was talking about. I think I'm going to actually ask his knight where it wants to go and claim a little extra space, make it more difficult for him to ultimately decide. If I hadn't gone with D5 or even E5, something like that, eventually he could try to play D5 or E5 himself, and now that will be much more difficult. I imagine if he offers me the knight trade with knight E5, I'm actually going to ignore it and then play bishop F4 with the obvious threat that his knight's now hit twice. Knight takes knight, queen takes. I also could consider G takes if I am going to castle long, to see if I could use this G file in some kind of caveman attack. But he could, if he tries to play knight to B4, okay, so we don't have to worry about that. So we'll go ahead and just put bishop F4 on the board as anticipated. Now I really just have to ask myself, what am I going to do do I want to take with knight takes knight is almost guaranteed here. I would be very surprised to see D6. So after knight takes knight, I don't actually really want to capture with my G-pawn. We're going to go ahead and pre-move queen takes F3. Well, I guess I am surprised. I didn't really expect D6. It feels like his light squares are very, very weak. So we're just going to pounce on him. Yeah. I imagine he's going to offer the bishop trade. Dropping the knight back doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense, but I have this now. and we're going to do a little damage to his structure. And he doesn't have time for bishop takes bishop intermezzo, because I will take his, oops, well, sorry for the bad arrow, but I would take his bishop and win the rook as well. So he does kind of have to show if he wants to sabotage his pawn structure right now, or offer me another attempt to sabotage his pawn structure for the cost of my knight. I think he's going to end up holding on to his bishop, but I have been wrong. And my streak of incorrectly predicting my opponent's moves continues. But that's okay, we'll go ahead and finish our idea of damaging this structure. So now we definitely have a comfortable advantage, so I'm going to actually drop my bishop back. This guy does not want to be on d7. He wants to be on b7, and now he can't get there in any reasonable kind of move order. So my plan here is pretty simple. I can, at my leisure, choose to castle kingside and just expand and suffocate my opponent, or I could still, if he wants to try to castle kingside, I could still play queen d2 or queen d3, maybe even queen d3, trying to get some lateral movement ability, and then still castle long and come after him. But I feel very comfortable in this position. I think the opening has gone our way. Anytime you try to play without a pawn in the center, it can be very difficult. Maybe I'm overestimating my advantages here, but I think I actually want to start opening things up. By moving this pawn, obviously, I don't think he can hang on to it, castling short. And then, of course, coming in with something like e5, kicking his pieces backwards, and then just having a monster duo here of pawns, something like that, would be very difficult for him to handle. In fact, I can just pre-move e5 if he takes. That's what I'm going to play. So, yeah. And now he's in a lot of trouble because the knight has to go home. He can't go to h5 because after knight h5, I simply take it, and after bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and his position is falling apart very quickly. So his knight has to return to g8. Well, he doesn't have to. I've been wrong most of this game when predicting my opponent, but it should go back to g8. And after the knight does return to g8, so let's assume he does that, I think I am going to go ahead and play queen d2 and plan on castling long. The nice thing is that by delaying this a turn, I haven't committed to the plan wholly. I can always change my mind. But I think queen d2, putting pressure on f4, we'll see how he tries to address his total lack of space. So when I talk about space, his minor pieces really don't have anywhere to operate, and it's difficult for him to make a pawn break that is reasonable without hurting his own position. So already we're seeing this piece has had to undevelop. His bishop is not where it wants to be. It wants to be on b7, and then his rook and his queen haven't moved. His king is still in the center. I'm about to castle, and then we'll look to attack. I might improve my rooks. I have time. I can maneuver. I have a lot of space behind these pawns to maneuver around, and I'm going to have plenty of pressure and advantageous breaks in the future. So this has just been a bit of a good way to look at how seeding the center can be a bit of a drawback in your opening decisions. Bishop f5. Bishop f5. So I have g4 at some point if I want it. He is hitting c3. If g4 and en passant, the idea, of course, is getting more lines to play with. I don't really think I need to sacrifice my g-pawn. He hasn't castled kingside and he's nowhere close to it. So what I'm thinking is I'm actually going to play, so if I play queen takes f4, bishop takes c2, castle short, I'm hitting f7. In that position, if he plays bishop back to f5 to remove the pressure of the queen and the rook on f7, I then play g4. There's no en passant and his bishop is hit. It can't defend f7 from e6 and he's in a world of hurt. So just to kind of go through that calculation, takes, castles, so now the rook is on this file. And then the rook, the queen are putting pressure on f7, the bishop comes back, then g4, and the bishop can't come here to defend the pawn. It's just not a pleasant position. So let's go ahead and do that and see if Kirito falls into this little trick, because now g4 is also, yeah, so he is falling into it. Yeah, this one is probably over now. I don't see a defense to this idea. This is too strong now. g4 is coming. Assuming he finds bishop f5, we're just going to put g4 right on the board. And he should be in some trouble. This can happen if you don't get your king to safety. Wow, I hadn't considered that. f5. I don't know why that move was just, I was completely blind to it. Now, obviously, I'm not going to capture. I have en passant, but I'm not going to. I don't need to allow him to get his knight out and break apart this strong center. I really didn't see f5. That's a bit sloppy of me. Nonetheless, I think we're still in pretty good shape. We're going to just start applying pressure, improving our pieces. I still don't see a way for him to, he can't move this knight and thus he can't move his rook. This rook has no prospects either. The queen has no good moves. We're gaining a tempo on the bishop as it is, but the bishop doesn't really have a good place to go. If he starts, well, actually, if he comes here, I'm just going to take it and renew my threat, because if he recaptures, in fact, do I have e6 there? Yeah, this is a problem. The knight controls this square, the pawn controls here. Everything is watched over, so after he drops his bishop back, actually after he drops his bishop back, what am I saying? Then I check him. I check. And then if the king moves here, now I can take the piece for free with my queen even, because there'll be a pin. And I'm taking with my queen so that he doesn't have queen takes pawn. Although I guess maybe that's not so bad, because then I would still have knight c7, forking the rook and the queen. But, I mean, I could just keep it simple with queen takes bishop. I don't see a need to get fancy. We'll revisit that position should it happen, but I think we're going to be seeing bishop e4, bishop b5, king f8, and then I have to make my decision if... Oh, what am I talking about? I don't have a knight here. What am I talking about? That's a bishop over there in that variation, not a knight. Goodness. All right, so let's reassess. Okay, so bishop check, king over. Obviously he could block, but that just is not a good move. King over, queen takes. I think we're just doing that. There's no need for me to lose this pawn. Yeah, and that's just not going to be pleasant. Yeah, I don't think that there is any sneakiness. I don't see, in fact, I really don't even see any plans at all. after, especially after losing the bishop for nothing. But there are only 3 legal moves here. Well, 4. You could give up the queen. So after king f7, I have e6 check that I actually have to consider if that is better than... I thought he was going to go to f8. So by coming here... Well, also taking with the knight now gives me knight g5 check. So I might actually want to take with the knight. This piece is free. The only question is, do I want to allow queen takes d5? No, there's no problem with queen takes d5, is there? Because after the knight takes, the rook is watching c4, queen takes d5, bishop c4 pins the bishop to the queen. I do want to take with the knight. In fact, this pawn is poison. Yeah, this is a problem. For black, not for us. Queen takes, and then ouch town. Oh, we're going to get it. Yeah, we're probably going to see a resignation after that. But of course, this was probably hopeless before losing the queen. I don't know if an engine would have some kind of forced mate by now, but we're probably getting pretty close to that territory. Yeah. So grabs the bishop on his way out, but this is gone. We'll still try to be accurate, and I don't know, man. This is tough to even like. I mean, obviously we have overwhelming force, yeah. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. It just turned out very unpleasantly for my opponent. Yeah. So before we turn on the engine, let's go ahead and try to go over the game ourselves. What's there to say? I used to have a lot of trouble with the Nimzowitsch defense. I don't think b6 is a common second move. Most of the time here, we're gonna... really, knight f6. I've most commonly seen d6 in my games, but that's all the way down here at... This is the 4th most common between masters. I currently have my settings for master games. How about that? But I used to have trouble against the Nimzowitsch as a kid. I don't really fear it now. This b6 plan, we're already out of any book. I'm not a tremendous fan of this sort of maneuvering. I think with black, you're already down that first move. You want to try to be stabilizing or equalizing. And this is just, it feels too slow. I mean, at this point we have classically developed knights, classically developed pawns. The center is just ours. It's just completely ours. He really needed to find the time to put one of these pawns at least one step forward. I know that this style, this modern style of putting pressure on the center from the flanks is very popular among players, very strong rated even, but classically you do want to control mainly the center 4 and of course the 12 squares directly around those. These central 16 are extremely important in the game of chess, and having control over them gives you flexibility with your plans and of course your tactics. So here we claimed some space, started gaining tempi, and I mentioned that I'd be very surprised to see d6, which we did see in the game. Knight takes knight, and then queen takes, and we're probably looking at a plan to develop this guy in castle long and then go, go, go. F2, F4 is likely. we would have had a nice, sharp middle game, most likely. I don't think that this position is terrible for black. I think white is still better, but by no means is this not playable. d6, though, once we have d6 after bishop f4, I really do not like this move. It opens up his king, his light squares are Swiss cheese, and he's just inviting me to sabotage his pawn structure with no compensation to show for it, really. I think this is where we started to see black slip in this game. This bishop obviously does not want to be on d7. So an important note here is that particularly with younger players, you see this a lot. You make a move with a piece that creates a threat, and then a lot of younger players or newer players feel compulsed to move the same piece again. And you obviously do not have to fall into that line of thinking. Here, it's much better to snag this knight, and he can either immolate his own bishop with his pawns, or he can allow me to damage his pawn structure as he did in the game with bishop takes, then knight takes, then pawn takes. If he were to capture, this bishop looks very silly. His scope has been reduced to just these sad two little squares. It's still a great defender of the king side, but its offensive potential has been completely shut down. So he takes with the bishop, and we see in the game now he has these doubled pawns. This is now potentially a target. If I can make it flinch, which we see later, I gain just total control. Now, this is a very good moment here. Identifying that this bishop on this square is very bad for black is why I don't want to trade a good piece for a bad piece. So by dropping my bishop back, I am saying to black, your light squares are still dubious. Your bishop is not where it belongs, and it's infringing on your ability to finish deployment of your troops. So after knight f6, f4, this is a tricky move. I don't think you can capture. I'm not sure what's best. Maybe even castling, and then after pawn takes knight here, it's really ugly. You can at least bring the knight to g7. Your king is at least castled. It's probably technically losing even at that point, but there just isn't a great solution at this point already. Yeah, this is rough. You just don't even have time to try to play c6, queen c7, and get this rook in. There's just no time. The light squares are so bad. This is just very, very rough. I doubt that it looks good, but castling and then after pawn takes knight back might have been his best hope to just stay in the game longer. By taking, now the position is completely untenable. Yeah, once the knight undevelops, the king is no way gonna get away from the center. I'm not gonna let it happen. Now it's just a matter of time before I break through. I feel like this is got to be really, really strongly rated in terms of how an engine would look at this position, which we'll find out here in a little bit. But this is just really slipped away from black. The lack of central control. I know I keep harping on it, but this game really illustrates the strength of controlling the center. And I can afford to temporarily sacrifice a pawn to increase that grip that I have and that space advantage that I have. This, this move was a bit not tremendously surprising, but he just doesn't have a lot of plans. I actually was really considering, I didn't voice it at the time, but I really was considering if he should undevelop the bishop just to put it on b7 where he wants it, and then playing the queen up and castling long was another plan perhaps for black, but it's just very hard to play this position. And here I thought we were going to see a little trick. I was planning g4, where in this position, if the bishop moves, especially here, then we have mate. But all the way back, check. And this is probably mating, actually. Yeah. But it would have been a mess. He actually does avoid that with f5. But now, this bishop just is got nowhere to go. He's got nowhere to go. And these light squares remained weak. At this point, it's just cleanup. Yeah. So 20 moves. Let's go ahead and run that through and see if we missed any points of interest or any tactics, or if we perhaps played sloppily in any way. The other thing is you always do want to keep an eye out for time management, not just in online games, but obviously over the board as well if you're a tournament player. One of the things that I've had to work on in the past is making sure that I don't spend long times on moves that I know I'm going to make. So we see that, especially with the pre-moves, if I know I'm going to do something, I'm not going to take so long. Now, if you are a tournament player and you have an hour, 2 hours, a 30-second increment, things like that, it does change a little bit in terms of time management. You can think longer in those spots. You can spend 5, 6, 7 minutes to really make sure you understand the position. But in a game that's a bit quicker, even though it's 20+2, it is still a bit quicker online, and you never know if something comes up. You're going to want to make sure that you have time to spend in critical moments. Fortunately, we didn't have too many critical moments in this game. We can even kind of see the rewind of the clock over here. Yeah, I ended up using about 1/4 of my time, and my opponent used about half of his. All right, but the analysis is in. D5 it didn't like. I guess it does like just developing and then castling. That's the sort of thing Stockfish likes. H4. Oh, Simon Williams on the phone. Harry the H-pawn, here he goes. H4. You know, that probably should have been on my radar. If you don't know who Simon Williams is, his handle is the Ginger GM. He is the player that actually got me into learning the Dutch defense. You should check out his work, his Twitch, his YouTube. He's got a lot of great content, a very strong player, and he is a humongous advocate of pushing the H-pawn, which I'm a little ashamed that wasn't even on my radar. Wow! The 5th best. I'm not going to be too salty about it. 0.9 versus 1.3 in the opening is not something I'm going to get so bent out of shape about. I think D5, yeah, and it's even climbing. I think D5 made a lot of sense just in terms of putting pressure on my opponent and making him come up with solutions. It should just be noted that this is starting to stabilize closer to my decision, but the engine still does like getting pieces out and getting ready to castle rather than claiming the space, which I guess makes sense. It's not a tremendous difference. I do wish I had thought of the H-pawn thrust, though. That is a bit sad. Now we see a sharp decline here. You don't see knight c3 as often nowadays. But I kind of like it in these e4 setups. Specifically because so many people just play knight f3 after e4 against so many different openings. Maybe, obviously not the center counter or the Scandinavian. You don't see here you're not going to see knight f3, but you know, against the French, against Perks or moderns, Sicilians, especially the very famous opening. Everybody is going to see this at some point in their life who plays chess. But I really like knight c3. You can still transpose into a lot of good variations, and I'm kind of addicted to pushing my f-pawn around, as you saw in this game, actually. I'm always looking for an opportunity to thrust the forget about it pawn. I forget which coach that is. There's a famous chess coach who calls the f-pawns the forget about it pawns. Don't touch them. But I like having the flexibility to play f2, f4 at my leisure in the opening. So, but yeah, I think that we handled this one pretty well. No sharp drops, no major mistakes or blunders. Yeah, we see here already it's kind of getting ugly. Yeah, c6. It's just saying break things apart, try to make something happen. This still is not. Yeah, I mean, this is. And then castle long, of course, the engine finds this idea to be better than what happened, which it's fair, but this is still very unpleasant. This is not an easy position to play. Yeah, but this I think this whole idea with f2, f4 just instantly makes the game a technical win, as we see. Yeah. Now he's just getting bullied. I wonder if f6, how about that? See here, and of course g4 instantly shoots to the top, and he has to just give this up. Yikes. But f5, he found. Now it's just one thing after the next. Wait, what? Why did that drop? Bc4? Okay, that was strange. For a moment it looked like it was dropping, but obviously this is the best move. I was a little stunned by Stockfish there for a moment. Yeah, a nice clean win from start to finish. All right, well, I hope you took something from the video. I'll be coming out with more. I'll be releasing a Stockfish series soon. I'll start playing the various levels of Stockfish here on Lichess. So I hope you tune in for that if you like man versus machine sort of matches. Otherwise, I hope that you continue learning this great game if you're watching, took something from this one, and looking forward to hearing from you in the comments or in other endeavors. Take care now.